Because I got an email out of the blue a month or two ago from the Edison Hotel in New York. And the Edison Hotel, they shot part of The Godfather there. That's where Luca Brasi goes, and they put the knife in his hand on the bar, and they
Hmm.
strangle him. And then, I remember John does an analysis of the Godfather screenplay. I thought, I wonder if I could put together like a 1 day sort of experiential thing about the Godfather and do it at the Edison Hotel.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, maybe that's the key, is doing just something more experiential. I don't know.
Okay. Experiential meaning, really meaning what? Besides being at that hotel, which the experience of that wears off pretty quickly because that's just where you are.
Well, I think first of all, if you come there, you love The Godfather. So you're in the hotel, you're in the actual, and they really haven't changed it much
Hmm.
since they shot it. But really, the extent of it is you're in the hotel. And I thought at one point you could take the 50, 75 people, whatever it is, out into the lobby and show exactly where it was shot. And you can teach, half an hour of the class there in the lobby as people are coming and going and whatnot. So I don't know. I'm trying to think of ways to, maybe there's something to do with the live event. Maybe that triggers another idea. I don't know. It's sort of the game that you keep coming up with ideas until you think something sort of works.
Yeah. Well,
So
that's what I do. I keep coming here. And some of the half of the ideas I come up with, I realize won't work. So you move on.
yeah,
You just move on. But doing the Edison Hotel, what I'd love to, I would think it's interesting. The research I've done on The Godfather, and I've used The Godfather on my staging course, I used it. It doesn't matter. But that home where it was shot,
yeah.
it still exists. I think it's on Staten Island someplace.
Well, that was the second part, and I did this when I did the Kiss Expos. Was to do a Godfather location bus tour
Mm,
where so you teach a class for like 3 4 hours, then you get everybody on a bus and you go to the cathedral where they got married or where the baptism was. You
hmm.
take them to whatever, the courthouse. You go to the cemetery, where the Godfather's funeral was. I mean, there's so many cool locations in New York that you could do this.
Hmm. You could,
But
and if you go to each location,
yeah,
um, like the restaurant where the killing happened, the killing of the two guys happened.
which doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, that's too bad. But if you
Yeah,
go to some place that does exist, you say, okay, and then you show the scene that was shot there,
yeah.
so that's fresh in the mind. Then whatever you're doing, you're talking about the scene, and then it becomes an experiential immersion into that world.
But I don't know. When I did it with Peter Chris from Kiss, it was great. We did L.A. and we did New York, so we had 50 people on a bus, and it's funny because one of the locations we went to was the old Tower Records on Sunset, which
Hmm.
at that time had been closed for years, but they had repainted it to look like the Tower Records.
Wow.
And so we stopped there so people could get pictures outside. And I took a picture of Peter Chris with the whole group,
Hmm.
replicating one of the Kiss pictures that had been taken there. And there was one of those Starline tour buses.
Hmm.
And so I got out and I walked over to the tour line bus and I said, "Hey, if you guys want to see a celebrity, I've got Peter Chris on the bus." And it turns out the guy that was hosting the bus tour was a massive Kiss fan.
Mm.
He like leapt out of his, just left all the people on the van, and he ran over to Peter to take a picture, which I thought was really, really funny.
Hmm.
Now, do we have anything we want to discuss before we get into the podcast, or are we just going to
I,
go right into it?
I don't know. Um, Probably, yeah. No, listen, let's just start the podcast and see what happens.
Okay.
But I'm gonna let you lead it because you came up with all these ideas.
Okay. Let me just pull my notes back up here. Welcome to the Mark Travis and Derek Christopher podcast. I am Derek Christopher. Of course, I'm here with Mark Travis. Mark, good to see you.
It's good to see you, Derek.
So, Mark, I have a question for you. So, when I was
Hmm.
doing the second to last Story Expo in New York City, I had Robert McKee, I had Chris Vogler, I had John Truby, who I've known all these guys forever. And it kind of bugged me because I would get emails from people saying, you're not having any DEI people here. There's no inclusivity. And I thought, this is so weird because I've known these guys forever. That's why I picked them. And then I started thinking about the fact that over the years of Story Expo, I had plenty of people of color at Story
Hmm.
Expo. I had, you know, Black people, I had Asian, I had women, I had everything. It was so inclusive. And it got to the point that I would actually write very thoughtful responses to these people. And I say, look, just so you know, here is a list of the people that appeared at Story Expo over the years. So the fact that you're judging the entire event based on this one poster, I said, I don't understand. And I will say, 9 out of 10 of them apologized.
Really?
Yeah. And so I bring this up because the WGA, the Writers Guild of America, just put out their inclusion and equity report for 2025. And I wanted
Hmm.
to run these statistics by you and see what you thought and see if you had an idea. So when it comes to TV writers in the
Hmm.
23-24 season, what percentage of TV writers would you guess are people of color?
Besides the fact that I have those numbers written down in front of me,
What would you have guessed before you read those numbers?
that it was a lot lower than it
Yeah.
really, really is, because it's actually over 40%. But I would um, guess it's a lot lower. And
Yeah.
also one thing with your story, going back to the beginning of your story, where you said these were
Yeah.
people who say, what about DEI? How many years ago was that the story you told about Story
Oh,
Expo?
it wasn't even 2 years ago.
Oh, so back when the term DEI was in use.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Definitely,
okay.
definitely in use.
Okay. So getting back to your question about, yeah, the statistics that I read in that article surprised me, both on DEI and male versus female,
Yeah.
that it's reaching equanimity. It's
Yes.
reaching that sort of, depending on what you're measuring, how you're measuring it, even what you consider DEI, which who you put in that category. But anyway, but it's reaching equanimity. But in that article, also another statistic which has nothing to do with DEI,
Yeah.
has to do with the shrinking market for writers.
Oh, I was going to bring
So
that up. Yeah,
yeah, so
it's down
as
30%.
it's getting closer to equanimity, there are fewer jobs.
But why do you think you don't see that split in screenwriting? Screenwriting is still pretty much a white guy's game. And
Hmm.
I'm kind of wondering what's the difference? Is it because TV is a more fractured uh, system, or I don't know. I mean, what's your take on it?
Well, first of all, there are more TV writers than there are feature writers. I
Yeah,
mean, working. I'm talking about working because of a lot of television and the proliferation of jobs that
yeah,
there are, and the fact that there are, quote, the writers' rooms where you could have as many as a dozen writers, hired writers, and they're working
yeah,
on one series. Where a feature film you usually have that one writer. So there's that differentiation there. But I'm
yeah,
I'm going to bring up a delicate topic since we're on this topic,
yeah.
where people are saying, well, we need more DEI, we need more diversity. Fine, great. Is it based on color or is it based on talent? And,
Well,
and
but
another
that's a good
another
question.
in other words, let's just go to feature films. Why don't we have more people of color writing feature films? You'll have to ask them.
Yeah,
Because as you know, the feature film market, I mean, either you write something that's good enough that it's going to gain the interest and the momentum and the enthusiasm of those producers. And my feeling is, for the most part, they don't care about who wrote it, the color. They care about the product. Is this script something of value? But I'm going to tell you another story. I'm going to flip it for a second. A client of mine, who you do know, but I won't name, wrote a script, a very powerful, great script, which it'll be it's, project's finished now. It'll be coming out
yeah,
soon, but it's about a historical character in the 1930s, African American.
yeah.
He's not African American.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask you this question. Yeah, go ahead.
And some of the issue became with the producer. Oh, we should have an African American writer do a rewrite on this. And I
Right.
go, for what? Now you're assuming that African American writer is going to what? Bring more authenticity, the right language? What are you hoping? What are you expecting just because that person is African American is going to bring to that? Now, ironically, the original writer, the client of mine, no,
Yeah.
he's not, but he's also not white.
Okay.
He
Okay.
he's Persian.
Okay.
In other words, does he go into the DEI category or
Right.
not? In other words, when you're starting to divide this up, you have on race, you have on literally on color.
Yeah.
Is that a person of color? Now that's a wide range right there. And then when you are in a market, which we all are, we're talking about talent and quality of the product.
But let me, when you look at, for example, could Spike Lee have directed Schindler's List? Or could Steven Spielberg have directed Do the Right Thing? Is there something that you bring with your upbringing and your culture and the people that you hang out with that adds a level of authenticity? The script can be great, the story can be great, but does it add an extra level of authenticity if it's a topic and it's people that you are familiar with, that you are with all the time? Does that make a difference?
I think it makes a huge difference. A
Yeah,
huge difference. I mean, talking about Spielberg doing Schindler's List, yes.
yeah,
Spike Lee, Do the Right Thing or whatever, anything, and any of his films, yes. And these are directors, writer directors who come with a passion out of their own life experiences,
right.
what you're talking about, which is invaluable. So if, although Steven Spielberg did The Color Purple.
Yeah, but Oprah Winfrey was the EP on it.
Well, I know, but still, Spielberg was
Yeah,
the director. I mean, it's all. I mean, these are all come into consideration when you're creating a product, and the number of people of color who are hired, say within the television industry, becomes interesting. Those statistics. Oh, that's interesting.
yeah.
I hope it's because that they're bringing something of real value, white or of color, to the product that um,
Do you
has
think it's
resulted in them being hired.
is it because TV allows the audience to be more fragmented? So you can have people of color writing scripts that are designed for certain ethnic groups or certain religious groups because they'll find an audience for it. I remember Corey Mandel was saying that the name of the game now isn't so much ratings, it's how many people you can get to stick around to watch an entire series. So girls,
Hmm.
Leah Dunham, they were getting about 900,000 viewers, but those 900,000 viewers tuned into every single episode. And so they had a very loyal and dedicated fan base, a very dedicated audience.
Hmm.
So if, maybe if you've got a person of color writing a script and they're attracting 1 million people, maybe that's what it comes down to. Whereas if you're writing a screenplay, you got to open up in the box office and you have to have big numbers or you instantly go away.
Right. Or you get eaten up by Netflix and disappear. Um,
But see, but that's the other thing is I really wonder if that number will change when it comes to screenwriting because as the box office, the number of films that come to the box office, I mean, it used to be in 2017, 2018, there were over 900 films released in North America. And now that's
hmm.
down to about 500. But whereas the average studio puts out anywhere from 15 to 20 movies, Netflix is putting out 90 movies a year.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so if Netflix can cater to certain audiences, certain sensibilities, is that to me that seems like a great business model because then you're making money and you're pleasing a lot broader of an audience and more diverse audience.
Yeah, and getting into the DEI part of it, and getting back to the Writers Guild numbers here, you
Yeah,
know, BIPOC, BIPOC, 40%. Okay.
yeah,
Um, That's the number of, I'm assuming with the Writers Guild, people of color hired that year, that 40%, right?
that are working in TV, TV writers. Yes.
Yeah. And again, I don't think that's the issue.
Well, the bigger
The
issue is the fact that there's been such a drop in the number of TV writers.
Right. Well, that too. But putting that aside,
Yeah,
who's hiring these people? In other words, who are the producers? Who are the heads of studios? Who are the people even at Netflix who are making the decisions on a project?
right.
How diverse is that group? In other words, if you have an African American artist who's at the head of, who has the power to greenlight a project for Netflix,
Yeah.
in other words, how diverse is the power base there? Because the writers aren't the power base. The writers are employees. That's it. So
Yeah.
are the actors, all of that. So I think you have to move higher on that food chain and to see who is doing what, who is making those decisions, who, Netflix or any place else, who is spending the money.
And you know what? Talking about money, you know what I'd like to see, and I don't know if anybody's done the research on this, is they want to talk about equity and diversity and
Hmm.
inclusion. Does a show written by a white writer or a white writing staff, is it does it have a higher budget than a show written by a black writer or a black writing
Hmm.
staff? And to me, that's more of an indicator of true equity and inclusion.
Yeah.
That if
Yeah.
if you're getting the same budgets, then you're being honest. If you're not getting the same budgets, you ain't being honest.
Right.
Then
Exactly.
you're hiring for the wrong reason.
Yeah. And and especially you're hiring for the wrong reason if you're hiring that writer because she's black. I go, oh, he's black. And you go, okay, that's the wrong reason. If you're hiring them because of their voice and their talent and their ability to create a world, um, especially let's say it's a series and you're hiring them to do an episode, their ability to continue the process of writing the next Breaking Bad episode or something, or in other words, why, or this is another, are you hiring them because you've made a promise to hire more people of color?
Right. Are you doing it because you feel it's mandated or that management is telling you you have to do this so it looks good on paper?
Yeah, or yeah, it'll make you look good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if the results aren't there, I mean, you can hire as many people of color as you want, but if they can't write good stories, it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
I mean, ultimately, it always comes down to the numbers. It comes down to the ratings. It comes down to how much money people are making, and the fact that you're actually seeing. And now, okay, let me go to this. The fact that you saw, I think it was an 8 or 9% increase in people of color in TV writing
Hmm.
from last year to the year before. Maybe that's a great indicator of the fact that the ratings are there, that the numbers are there, that the business is there.
Maybe. Also, how many of those writers are showrunners?
Yes.
I'm going up this, should now showrunner who has the power to
Yeah.
hire or not hire a runner, and how many of those are of color? And now for Netflix or anybody to say, we're going to do this series with this showrunner and this person of color. Now you're hiring their sensibilities, their taste, their skill set.
I did a podcast interview with Peter Melman, who was the executive producer and showrunner from Seinfeld.
Mm.
And he was saying that the problem today is that you can't have the free for all writers room like you used to have. He said you used to be able to go in and joke about anything. Now you have to be worried about the person you're telling the joke to in the writers room. And it was really interesting to hear him
Yeah.
say that. But what shocked me was the comments that the video got, which is, oh, well, he's just an older white guy, so his sensibilities and what he wants is different from what's reality. And I'm thinking, like, he's just telling you what his experience is.
Or
Everybody's going to have their own experience.
actually, that comment
Yeah.
about oh, he's just an older white. That's what he's talking about. Comments like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Which are prejudicial comments. Oh, he's just an older white guy who's, oh, that's not getting us anywhere.
right, right. But it is kind of funny when you think about Seinfeld really didn't have any black characters except the attorney who was hysterical, Jackie,
Yeah.
you know. But I don't, you know what? I don't think you have to include every person, every race, every religion in a TV show. I mean, does it really matter? I mean, if Key and Peele, I don't know if you've ever seen Key and Peele, fucking hysterical, funnier than
Hmm.
anything SNL could ever do. And SNL run by an old white guy who should probably retire.
Hmm.
Um, but Key and Peele is hysterical. And Dave Chappelle, you go back and watch Chappelle's show,
Hmm.
the original show, hysterical, has nothing to do with color. It's just
Right.
that Dave Chappelle is brilliant and he's funny. Key and Peele, brilliant and funny.
Hmm. Yeah.
You know,
And,
just like
and
you watch
a
the
lot of
Jeffersons.
that is coming from life experience of that
Yes.
individual,
Yeah.
which is for everybody, you and me and everybody else, anybody else is unique. We all
Yeah.
have unique life experiences. How capable are we or willing are we to dig into and expose and use our life experience to inform a story, a character, or whatever? I mean, Dave Chappelle can be ruthless, but
Oh, yeah.
in a gentle way. I mean, I've seen him say, "I go, whoa, whoa, you're right on the edge," but he does it knowing that he's playing right on the edge,
But
beautifully.
sometimes he crosses the edge. I don't know if you ever saw, he did a skit about a blind black guy who didn't know he was black and he was the head of the KKK.
I mean, that to begin with is funny, but go ahead.
But yeah, well, that's my point. Is just the premise of that is hysterical.
Yeah.
So color really doesn't matter. I mean, even though actually it is based, the whole thing is based on color, but it's based on all the idiot views based on color about color.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I think it's a positive thing. Um, you know where DEI is going now. A lot of the companies, the corporations are pulling back on it because of the current political climate.
Hmm.
Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. I think time will tell where everything lands. I mean, I think the bigger problem, though, in the industry is the fact that there are no jobs. I think the
Yeah.
fact that you saw TV writers drop from 2,300 writers 2, 3 years ago to 1,600 writers now is bad. I think the fact that you see movies that being released in the to theaters dropping from over 900 to 500 now,
Yeah.
that's bad. You have fewer opportunities, and I think that's what people should be worried about is creating more opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. And the reasons for all that collapsing goes back to COVID and a lot of other things.
Yeah,
And the
and the writer's strike
and the
really
writers,
did a number.
yeah, the writers' strike. And now we're talking about inclusion or exclusion. Insistence on either one is dangerous.
Yes.
Oh, we have to have more
Yeah.
inclusion. Not necessarily. We have to now the political climate exclusion. Well, exclude
Yeah.
all, and the people losing their jobs because they wrote something about DEI. I mean, it's frightening. That is
It is
frightening.
frightening.
And it's frightening not just because it's about DEI. You can actually put that aside.
Yeah.
Losing their job because of a personal opinion.
Right.
And they're writers, they're artists, and that's what we want from them is their personal opinion, like David Chappelle. We want to hear that. Whether we like them or not, we don't have to watch them. But we
Yeah.
but we don't want it to be bland and very vanilla-like and not interesting, not funny, not moving or something. So this is what we are all asked to do or expected to do. And then when you say, well, you can't do that because it's, quote, politically incorrect or you'll
Yeah.
lose your job. And people are losing their jobs because of an opinion, because they wrote something.
Well, I think that's a danger too. If you go too far on the spectrum with DEI, um, you know, comedy, for example, is meant to be politically incorrect. It's meant to push the boundaries. It's meant to
Hmm.
upset people. And so when you start muzzling people, that's not a good thing either.
No, no. So I
So,
said we have
okay.
to look at it from both sides. But
Yeah.
then there's the other issue, which is a serious one, a very serious one, which is the slow collapse of the whole industry, both
Right.
features and television. And I
Yeah.
know I have a lot of people who, they're friends of mine, associates and clients of mine who work in that business and are scrambling now to
Yeah. I know a lot of
try
people too.
to find a job. And there are a lot of old factors to do with this, which is younger people are coming up and can do sort of the same job for less money and all that. But basically, the which is in the Writers Guild article, the whole landscape of employment is shrinking.
Yes.
Now that goes along with, and I think it's a parallel, Derek, to what you and I talked about, I think in another podcast about the world that you worked in so brilliantly for so many years of screenwriting expositions and expos and people bringing people around the world to network and learn from each other. And
Yeah.
that world is shrinking. That's the world that you and I met in. That world is so that's part of the whole shrinkage. And some of it is you can blame on the internet and Zoom, the very thing we're using right now. Um, that people say, "Oh, why should I go to that thing if
Yeah.
if I can get it on Zoom? I can
Right.
I'll Google it and find out the answer."
Well, and the one thing too, also that you'll never get rid of is that there're just some scumbags in this industry. I mean, I remember my buddy Troy DeVold. Rest in peace,
Hmm.
Troy. Troy was in the reality TV realm,
Hmm.
and he would talk about years ago when Troy worked on some of the biggest shows, Dancing with the Stars, The Bachelor, and whatnot. But then you would get the EP of the show or the creator of the show saying, Troy, I can bring somebody in to do your job for 1/4 of the price, but they have no experience. And it would drive Troy crazy. Or he'd be working at a company and the production company would get, $5 million to shoot a season of a TV show. And the guy that runs the company would say, okay, I'm taking $1 million right off the top for myself. And then you guys have to figure out how to scrounge and make the other episodes for the $4 million. So
Hmm.
you have also just pure scumbags in the
Hmm.
industry who want to
Right.
take advantage, who don't care about the quality, who don't care about the storytelling, and will just try to do it as cheaply as possible.
Hmm. Which is
Which
true
is,
true
yeah,
in probably every business.
yeah, that's
Where
true.
every business where there's a lot of money flowing
Yeah,
and where it appears that people without talent are getting a lot of that money. And their
yeah.
talent, and a lot of them are, and their talent is getting the money for
Well,
themselves, extracting the money.
I was reading in that article too that they said that Netflix is paying in the ballpark of $300,000 per script, which is a lot more than you're going to make on a spec script if you sell it, unless it
Hmm.
becomes a big hit. So there's a lot to be said about streaming. I know people they worry about streaming taking over the movie theaters and movie theaters closing, but if it opens up more opportunities for more storytellers, is that a bad thing?